The world didn't end with fire or screams. It ended with silence. Grant Hale stood on the roof of a ruined skyscraper in what used to be New Chicago, watching the dead sky. No satellites moved. No aircraft streaked across the horizon. The once glittering network of humanity's chatter, billions of voices bouncing across the globe, was gone. Earth had gone dark, silent as a graveyard. For the first time in recorded history, not a single human broadcast was moving through the void. To the galaxy watching from afar, that silence meant one thing. Humanity had finally been crushed. Grant knew better. The air carried the sour smell of ash and rust. Buildings sagged like tired corpses, their windows shattered, their steel frames bent from orbital strikes. The aliens had come with precision, erasing communication hubs first, then power grids, then the sprawling cities that once defined humanity's arrogance. They wanted Earth broken, but not gone. They wanted proof that their empire had stamped out the problem of mankind. But they had made one mistake. They hadn't killed everyone. Grant tightened his grip on the rifle strapped across his back, the weapon a Frankenstein of salvaged alien parts and old human engineering. His gloves were burned through at the fingers, and his hands were scarred from months of scavenging wreckage and fighting like a rat in the ruins. His mind drifted back to the night it all went silent. He had been in a military outpost when the sky lit up with burning streaks, like the stars themselves were falling. Entire command chains vanished in minutes. The Earth's defense grid, something humanity believed would make them untouchable, folded like paper. His brother Marcus had been manning the comms. He never made it out. The last words Grant heard before the console burned him alive were, "They don't want to kill us all. They want us to watch." Now, the galaxy believed Earth was finished. The transmissions of laughter, war, music, even humanity's endless arguments had gone quiet. And across the stars, the other races would breathe a sigh of relief, thinking the wild, unpredictable species of Earth had finally been erased. But silence wasn't surrender. It was the sound of teeth being bared in the dark. Grant crouched as a low hum rippled in the distance. Alien drones, slick silver predators shaped like wasps, scoured the ruins. He had learned how to stay beneath their sensors, move slow, control your breath, become part of the wreckage. The first time he saw them sweep an area, they torched 20 survivors who tried to run. He had dragged himself through the corpses afterward, vowing he'd never give the enemy the satisfaction of his panic. He slithered into a collapsed subway tunnel, where faint torchlight glowed ahead. Inside, a cluster of gaunt men huddled around a rusted generator. Their eyes flicked up as Grant entered, but no one spoke until he dropped a sack of stolen alien rations at their feet. "You did it?" one of them whispered, voice hoarse. Grant nodded once. "Drone patrol went down over the river, pulled what I could before they came looking." The men tore open the sack like wolves, devouring the pale meat inside. One of them, an old soldier with half his jaw missing, muttered through broken teeth, "They think we're finished." That's what they want the stars to believe. Grant sat down, leaning his rifle against the wall. His throat was dry, but his voice was steady. "Let them think it. Let the whole galaxy breathe easy. They don't understand what's coming." The old soldier's eyes glistened. "And what is coming, Hale?" Grant stared into the darkness of the tunnel, hearing the faint buzz of alien craft above, the world still under their boot. He thought of his brother's final words, of the silence that now blanketed Earth. "Annihilation," Grant said softly. "Not ours, theirs. They killed the wrong species." No one argued. The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was a shared oath, unspoken but heavy in the air. Above them, the galaxy believed Earth was just another conquered world. But beneath the ashes, men like Grant Hale were waiting, sharpening their rage into something the stars had never faced before. And when Earth finally broke its silence, the sound would be war. Grant woke to the metallic hum of the generator sputtering out its last breath. The stale air in the tunnel pressed against his chest as he sat up, his rifle still strapped across him like a second spine. He didn't need to check. He knew the generator had failed again. The dim orange glow it had fed into the subway chamber had died in the night, leaving only shadows and the smell of oil. He rose quietly, careful not to step on the huddled bodies sleeping on the concrete floor. Men who had once been engineers, farmers, construction workers, now just bones wrapped in rags. Every face carried the same hollow eyes, a mixture of hunger, rage, and the kind of grief that never found words. Grant climbed a cracked stairwell and peered out through a collapsed entryway where daylight leaked through. The city above stretched in silence, towers like broken teeth, smoke plumes still twisting from distant impacts. The aliens hadn't bothered to clean up their mess. They didn't need to. The thought burned in him like acid. They had reduced Earth to silence, yes, but silence was a mask. Beneath it, the rage of men who had lost everything was sharpening into a weapon. He pulled a small receiver from his pack, a crude box of wires and plates cobbled together from military scraps. He turned the dial slowly, waiting for even a crackle of signal. Nothing. Just dead air. For months he had scanned the spectrum, listening to the void where human voices used to be. The aliens had erased every frequency, every satellite, every system. But he didn't believe for a second that humanity had died everywhere. "Anything?" a voice rasped behind him. Grant didn't flinch. He recognized the old soldier, Kieran, his jaw still bandaged in dirty cloth. He had climbed the stairs like a ghost, rifle dragging behind him. "Nothing yet," Grant said. Kieran leaned on the wall, coughing into his sleeve. "You ever wonder if maybe it really is over? Maybe there's no one left to hear us?" Grant's hand tightened on the receiver. "Number, they'll hear us. And when they do, the whole galaxy will regret what happened here." The old man's eyes studied him in silence. Then a grim smile tugged at the corner of his ruined mouth. "You sound like a fool, Hale, but a dangerous one. That's what we need." By midday, the survivors had gathered. There were fewer than 40 of them now. They sat in the circle of dim firelight, gaunt faces watching Grant as he laid out maps scavenged from a burned-out command post. The paper was charred on the edges, but the ink still showed the layout of the city and the locations of known alien patrol zones. "They control the skies. They control the orbital lanes. They've got machines sweeping every district," Grant said, his voice steady, though his body screamed with exhaustion. "But they're lazy, arrogant. They think we're finished, so they've thinned their patrols. I've watched them long enough to see their gaps." He marked an X on the map with a piece of charcoal. "Here, supply depot. Alien tech guarded by drones. If we take it, we get food, power cells, and maybe more weapons." Murmurs rippled through the group. One of the younger men shook his head. "We're 40 against machines that can vaporize us. That's suicide." Grant met his gaze without flinching. "It's suicide if we stay here too. You think they'll let us rot forever? Number, they'll finish the job when it suits them. The only chance we have is to hit back, make them bleed, and remind them who they're dealing with." Kieran's gravel voice cut through the doubt. "The boy's right. Death's coming either way. Might as well meet it swinging." The silence that followed wasn't hesitation. It was acceptance. Every man there had already lost his family, his home, his life. The only thing left was revenge. Grant saw it in their eyes, that spark. Not hope, not really, but something darker, something stronger. "Then it's decided," Grant said. "We strike tomorrow night. While they planned in the ruins of New Chicago, the galaxy watched Earth's silence from afar. On the neutral trade worlds, rumors spread like wildfire. The humans had finally been exterminated. News feeds broadcast hollows of Earth's burning cities, replayed footage of orbital strikes, and analysts spoke with smug certainty. Humanity, they said, had always been too reckless, too chaotic, too violent. It was inevitable they would meet their end against a disciplined empire. Across alien council chambers, leaders congratulated themselves. The threat was gone. The unpredictable species that had turned every battlefield into a slaughterhouse, that had defied every diplomatic prediction, that had clawed its way into the stars with grit instead of grace, finally silenced. But in the darker corners of the galaxy, whispers grew. Some races remembered what humans had done in the wars before. They remembered colonies that fought until every last man, woman, and child was dead rather than surrender. They remembered human soldiers who bit through their own tongues to spit blood in their captors' faces. They remembered the one truth that history had proven over and over again. Silence never meant defeat when it came to mankind. That night, as the survivors prepared their weapons, Grant sat apart, staring at the cracked ceiling of the tunnel. His rifle rested across his lap, his hands tracing the scratches in the metal. Each one told a story. A fight survived, an enemy killed, a step deeper into hell. He thought of Marcus again. His brother's face burned into his memory, his voice echoing with that last warning. They don't want to kill us all. They want us to watch. But Marcus was wrong. They had killed enough to awaken something far worse. Grant closed his eyes and whispered into the silence, as if speaking to the galaxy itself. You should have left us alone. The next day, when the alien drones swept over the ruined city, their scanners registered no unusual movement. Just silence, just ruins, just a dead world. And beneath that silence, men sharpened their knives and loaded their rifles, ready to show the universe what annihilation really looked like. The night bled across the ruins, black and heavy, the kind of night where shadows swallowed men whole. Grant crouched at the edge of a shattered overpass, his breath steady, as his eyes scanned the depot below. Alien lights glowed cold and pale, casting long streaks across the cracked concrete. Sleek silver crates were stacked in geometric precision, each one humming faintly with energy. Above, 2 drones patrolled in lazy arcs, their wings slicing the air with a high-pitched whine. He held up a clenched fist. The men behind him froze. 40 had dwindled to 35. Disease and hunger had stripped them further before they could even strike. Now those 35 clung to rifles, blades, and whatever courage starvation hadn't stolen. Grant's jaw tightened. He knew most wouldn't see the dawn. But this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about making the galaxy remember Earth. Kieran slid up beside him, jaw still wrapped in filthy cloth, rifle slung across his crooked shoulder. His one good eye reflected the depot's glow. "Drones will spot us the second we fire," he muttered. "That's fine," Grant said. His voice was iron. "We're not hiding tonight." He checked his rifle. Scratched. Human steel patched with stolen alien parts. A beast as broken and brutal as its wielder. He slid a crude power cell into the chamber until it clicked. Around him, the men did the same. Grant raised 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. They moved. The first explosion shattered the silence. A homemade charge detonated against the outer wall, showering sparks and metal. Alarms shrieked in alien tongues as drones whipped through the air, their red sensors flashing. Grant fired before the first beam of plasma cut across the night, his shot ripping through a drone's core and sending it spiraling into the dirt. "Move!" he roared, his voice raw against the storm of gunfire. Men poured into the depot like a flood of ghosts, rifles barking, grenades clattering against the polished crates. Plasma streaks scorched the ground, slicing through human flesh, turning screams into echoes that vanished into smoke. But they didn't falter. Every man who fell dragged another shot from his brothers, rage drowning fear. Grant ducked behind a crate, metal searing his back as a beam tore past. He yanked a grenade from his vest, pulled the pin with his teeth, and hurled it into a cluster of drones. The blast ripped them apart, alien parts raining like metal hail. He surged forward, rifle spitting fire, until his boots kicked through glowing circuitry. He saw a young man crumple beside him, chest opened by plasma, his eyes wide in shock. Grant didn't stop. He stepped over the body and kept firing, his mind locked on the objective. Supplies. By the time they breached the central stack, the depot was burning. Alien screams cut through the smoke, guards, tall and armored, wielding blades that shimmered with unnatural light. Grant met one head-on, his rifle empty. He swung it like a club, the stock cracking against the alien's helmet. The creature staggered, hissing. Grant drove a knife up under its armor and twisted until the body fell twitching at his feet. Kieran appeared from the haze, dragging 2 crates by sheer will. His bandaged jaw leaked blood from a fresh wound, but his one good eye burned. "Food and cells," he rasped. Grant nodded once, firing into the smoke behind him. "Get them out, now!" The men rallied, grabbing crates, dragging them toward the shattered wall. Plasma fire followed, but for every man who fell, another heaved a box onto his back and kept moving. Grant stayed last, covering the retreat, his rifle blazing until it clicked empty. He drew his knife again, teeth clenched, eyes fixed on the depot they were leaving in flames. The galaxy had believed Earth silent. Now its silence was broken by fire. He turned and ran, lungs burning, following the trail of his men into the ruins. Behind him, the depot roared, explosions tearing the night apart. They didn't stop until they reached the subway tunnels, each man collapsing where he stood, crates piled in, the dark like treasure. Blood soaked the concrete. 25 had returned. 10 were gone. Grant dropped to his knees, chest heaving. His hands shook as he reloaded, even though no enemy followed. Around him, men tore into the crates, ration packs of pale alien meat, canisters of glowing energy, strange weapons they didn't yet understand. For the first time in months, they had more than scraps. Kieran slumped against the wall, his bandages soaked crimson. He spat blood into the dirt, then gave a broken laugh. "They'll notice that. Whole damn galaxy will notice." Grant leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the taste of smoke and blood still in his throat. He saw Marcus's face again, the way his brother's hands had burned as the console fried him alive. He saw the moment Earth went silent. Good, he thought bitterly. Let the galaxy watch. Let them whisper. Let them feel the first edge of the storm. He stood, towering over the men, his voice sharp as steel. "Tonight, we proved Earth isn't dead, but this isn't enough. We're going to hit them again and again until the galaxy knows what silence really means." The men looked up at him, their faces smeared with blood and ash, their eyes hollow but burning. And in that moment, Earth's silence had turned into something else. A promise. In the outer colonies, alien fleets would soon see the reports. One of their depots on Earth burned to the ground. Dozens of drones destroyed. Guards slaughtered. Supplies stolen. The galaxy would laugh at first. They would call it desperation, a fluke. the last gasps of a dying world. But Grant knew better. This was just the beginning. Earth's silence was over. The alien council chamber glittered with crystalline walls, its floor polished so perfectly it reflected the faces of the gathered leaders. Hollow screens flickered above the round table, replaying shaky drone footage of the raid. Fire streaking across the depot, drones bursting in midair, and men, starved, ragged, filthy, charging through the smoke like wolves. The footage ended with the depot exploding, flames devouring the feed. The chamber went silent. "They were supposed to be finished," one counselor hissed, its long fingers curling into the table. Its voice was sharp, its words dripping disdain. "Earth was silenced. We struck their cities, their fleets. They had nothing left." Another counselor, scaled and broad, leaned forward. "Yet they burn our depots. They kill our drones. Those animals still breathe." The presiding commander, draped in ceremonial armor, raised a hand. His voice was calm but cold. This was not a battle. This was desperation. What you saw was the death throes of a defeated species. They cannot rise. Their silence remains. But in the back of the chamber, one old strategist, scarred from wars centuries past, shook his head. His voice cut across the room like gravel. "Number, you misread them. Silence is never death for humans. It is teeth sharpening in the dark. If they are striking depots now, it means they are not broken. It means they are preparing." The others dismissed him, but unease hung in the chamber. Back on Earth, Grant sat by the glow of a stolen power cell, his rifle resting across his knees. Around him, the survivors gnawed on alien rations, their bodies too starved to savor it. The crates from the raid had given them food and power for weeks. But the real prize sat in the corner of the tunnel, alien weapons, their surfaces slick and humming with strange energy. One of the younger men, hollow-cheeked and wild-eyed, tapped one nervously. "We don't even know how to use these. What if they blow our arms off?" Grant's voice was low, but it carried through the chamber. "Then we learn. We don't have a choice." He picked up one of the alien rifles, the metal cold and unnatural in his hands. He studied it the way a wolf studies a new kill, curious, cautious, already claiming it as his own. The men watched as he aimed into the tunnel wall and squeezed the trigger. A bolt of pale light seared into the concrete, sending shards flying. The men flinched, then stared at the smoking crater in silence. Grant lowered the weapon. "We'll figure out the rest." Kieran chuckled, a broken rasp. "God help the bastards when we do." Over the next days, the subway tunnels echoed with the crack of gunfire, the hiss of alien rifles, and the curses of men burning their fingers on strange power cells. They trained in the darkness, fumbling at first, then growing sharper, faster, meaner. Every mistake was punished, every hesitation mocked, every weakness beaten out. Grant drove them hard, harder than any drill sergeant had in the old armies. "You want revenge? Earn it. You want your family's killers to bleed? Earn it. You want to stop dying like cattle? Then stand up and learn to fight like men again." He tore them apart and rebuilt them. Starved farmers became riflemen. Broken workers learned to throw grenades with precision. Old men with shaking hands steadied them until they could slit throats in silence. They weren't an army. Not yet. But they were becoming something far more dangerous. Survivors. Wolves. Word of the raid spread beyond Earth. On outer mining colonies, traders whispered of humans rising from their ashes. On neutral worlds, smugglers bet credits on how long it would take for Earth's silence to erupt into war. Some laughed, others shivered. And on one distant planet, a young alien soldier stared at the reports and muttered under his breath, "They'll come for us. I've seen their kind before." But his commander silenced him with a backhand and spat. "Humans are done. Their silence is proof." One night, as the survivors cleaned their weapons, Grant climbed back to the ruined overpass where he had first scouted the depot. The wind carried smoke from the city, and the stars blinked cold above. He remembered how those stars had once carried humanity's voice. Songs, wars, laughter, rage, and now carried nothing. He clenched his fists, the scars on his knuckles pulling tight. Not nothing, he thought. Not silence. Not anymore. The galaxy believed Earth was a grave. He would make it a trap. The next morning he addressed the men. 35 faces stared at him, gaunt but burning with something new. "We hit a depot," he said, pacing slowly, voice sharp as a blade. "That was the first cut. The galaxy will laugh. They'll say we're desperate, broken, doomed. Let them laugh. That laughter will choke them when we hit again, and again, and again." He stopped, his eyes scanning each man. "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to remind the stars who we are. The day Earth went silent, they thought annihilation was coming for us. They were wrong." His voice dropped to a growl. "Annihilation is coming for them." The men roared, not loud, not joyous, but a guttural, feral sound that shook the tunnel walls. It wasn't the cheer of soldiers. It was the growl of predators. Grant felt it in his bones. The silence of Earth was gone. The hunt had begun. The first warning came in the form of silence. Grant woke to the absence of the generator's hum, not the usual sputtering or coughing fit, but dead silence. He sat up instantly, rifle already in his hands, instincts screaming. Around him, the men stirred uneasily in the dim glow of power cells, their faces sharp with hunger and exhaustion. Then came the sound, a low thrum that rattled the walls, distant but growing. "They're coming," Kieran rasped, his good eye narrowing as he shoved rounds into his rifle. Grant didn't answer. He knew what that sound meant. Drones were one thing, but this was heavier. Dropships. The tunnel shook as something massive roared overhead. Dust rained from the ceiling. Men scrambled to their feet, some panicking, some steadying themselves with clenched jaws. "Positions!" Grant barked. His voice cut through the fear like a blade. "We knew this day would come. Hold the line." The first blast collapsed the tunnel mouth, fire and concrete ripping through the darkness. Men screamed as shrapnel tore into them. Through the smoke came the drones, dozens of them, their wings shrieking like predators. Behind them, armored soldiers dropped in silence, their tall frames glowing faintly in the firelight, blades and rifles in their hands. Grant opened fire, the alien rifle kicking against his shoulder as bolts of pale energy cut into the enemy. One drone fell, then another, crashing in sparks. Around him, his men roared as they fought, the air filling with thunder, gunfire, plasma, screams. A young man fell at Grant's side, his chest opened by a drone's beam. Grant kicked the corpse aside and kept firing, his mind narrowing to one truth: kill as many as possible before the line broke. The tunnel became a slaughterhouse. Plasma beams carved through stone, grenades tore through clusters of men and machines, the walls dripping with fire and blood. Grant fought like a man already dead, his knife and rifle moving as one. He stabbed an alien soldier through the throat, ripped the weapon from its hands, and turned it on another. "Kieran!" he roared over the chaos. "I'm here!" came the rasp. The old soldier was on one knee, one arm useless, but still firing into the swarm with steady aim. The survivors rallied around him, their desperation turning into savagery. Every man fought like the end had already come, dragging enemies down even as they bled out. They didn't fight for life. They fought for vengeance. And then, as suddenly as it began, the enemy pulled back. The drones retreated through the smoke. The alien soldiers vanished into the darkness, leaving behind shattered bodies and burning wreckage. The survivors panted in the silence, their rifles still raised, their eyes wide with disbelief. Grant staggered forward, blood soaking his sleeve, his lungs burning with smoke. He saw the bodies of his men, too many to count, strewn across the floor. Kieran leaned against the wall, coughing blood, but still alive. "They could have finished us," Kieran rasped. His voice was suspicion, not relief. "Why didn't they?" Grant's jaw tightened. He knew the answer before he spoke. "They're testing us. They want to see how long we'll last." He spat into the dirt, his blood mixing with the dust. "Fine. Let them watch. Let the galaxy watch. Every drop they spill makes us stronger." Above Earth, the alien fleet hovered in orbit, silent and watchful. Reports streamed across their channels. Heavy resistance, higher casualties than predicted, humans refusing to break. The commanders debated furiously. "Exterminate them," one demanded. "Level the planet." "No," said another. "The silence must remain. If we wipe them completely, the galaxy will see. Let them fade into the dark. Let their deaths be slow." The old strategist who had spoken before leaned forward, his voice cold. "You are fools. Every breath you allow them, every second you leave them alive, you forge a weapon you cannot contain." His warning was ignored. Orders went out. The fleet would tighten its grip, starve the humans, bleed them, but never finish them. Not yet. In the tunnels, the survivors buried their dead in shallow pits, marking graves with broken rifles. 25 had fallen, 15 remained. Grant stood over the graves, his fists clenched, his body shaking with exhaustion. He looked at the men still alive, bloodied, broken, hollow, but their eyes burned brighter than ever. "They think we'll break," he said quietly, his voice raw. "They think if they squeeze hard enough, we'll vanish into silence again. They're wrong. They don't understand what they've done." He lifted his rifle, holding it high above the graves. "They've turned Earth into a forge, and we are the fire." The men answered with a growl, deep and guttural, the sound of predators. Grant knew then what the aliens had never understood. Annihilation wasn't coming for humanity. Humanity was annihilation. Across the galaxy, whispers spread faster than light. The humans were not dead. Their silence was not surrender. Reports of raids, ambushes, and battles trickled out. Some scoffed, others trembled, and on one mining colony, a smuggler raised his glass and said, "Mark my words, Earth isn't silent, Earth is hunting." The depot raid had been a statement. The counterattack had been a warning. But now Grant knew staying underground meant nothing but a slow death. He stood in the tunnel chamber, maps and alien crates spread before him, the last 15 men gathered around. Their faces were gaunt, eyes shadowed, bodies patched with scars and bandages. They were half dead already, but their silence was gone. Their eyes burned like coals. Grant laid a blackened finger on the map. "We've been rats in their ruins long enough. The fleet's still above us, watching, waiting for us to starve. We're not going to give them the pleasure." He looked up at the men. "We're going to take one of their ships." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of a stolen power cell. One of the younger men, barely more than a boy, shook his head. "We can't fly those things. We don't even know how they work." Grant's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. We've been figuring it out since the day the sky burned. If we can bleed them, we can fly them." Kieran coughed, blood flecking his ragged bandages. His one good eye locked on Grant. Where? Grant dragged the charcoal across the map, marking a spot near the shattered edge of the city. Landing zone. They use it for short-range dropships. Smaller craft, easier to steal. Lightly guarded if we move fast. Kieran gave a rasping laugh. Lightly guarded, he says. But no one argued. They knew there was no other path left. That night, under a moon choked by ash, they moved. The landing zone squatted in the ruins like a wound. Alien towers of black steel, their surfaces glowing faintly, surrounded by a perimeter of drones and soldiers. In its center sat the prize. 3 dropships, sleek and silver, their wings folded like waiting predators. Grant crouched in the rubble, his rifle steady in his hands, his eyes locked on the ships. The men waited behind him, clutching their weapons like lifelines. "This isn't about escape," Grant whispered. "It's about telling the galaxy. We're not done. If we get one of those ships, every world will know Earth still breathes. If we die loud enough that the stars hear us." He raised his hand. 3 fingers, 2, 1. The night erupted. The first shots ripped through the drones, their sensors flashing red before they crashed in sparks. Men screamed war cries that shook the ruins, grenades sailing into the perimeter. Alien soldiers rushed forward, blades gleaming, rifles spitting light. Grant charged straight into them. His rifle roared, cutting one soldier down, then another. When the weapon clicked empty, he swung it like a club, smashing into armor, stabbing with his knife until the ground was slick with alien blood. "Push forward," he bellowed. The men surged with him, desperation turning into savagery. Plasma tore through human flesh, but no one stopped. They fought like wolves, dragging enemies down, biting, clawing, stabbing with broken blades. The dropships loomed closer. Kieran limped beside Grant, firing with one arm, his face a mask of blood and fury. A plasma bolt caught him in the chest, knocking him to the ground. He gasped, blood bubbling at his lips, but his eye still burned. "Go," he rasped. "Take it. Make them pay." Grant knelt for a second, gripping the old man's shoulder. He saw not weakness, not defeat, but the same fire that had carried them this far. "I'll make them choke on your name," Grant swore. Then he rose and ran. The ramp of the nearest dropship hissed open, alien pilots spilling out with weapons raised. Grant cut them down with stolen fire, his body moving on fury alone. He stormed up the ramp, boots slick with blood, and into the cockpit. The alien controls glowed with strange symbols, pulsing softly. He didn't understand them. But he remembered Marcus, his brother's voice on the comms, his fingers flying across consoles with instinct. His words burned into Grant's mind. "Machines are just puzzles, Grant. Break them, bend them, or make them sing." Grant slammed his hands onto the controls, dragging levers, smashing buttons, listening to the hum of the engines. The ship groaned, lights flickering. Then a deep vibration shook the floor. Outside, the survivors, still standing, fought tooth and nail, holding back the tide. The dropship shuddered. Then it lifted. The ground fell away, fire and wreckage shrinking beneath. The surviving men inside screamed with a mix of terror and triumph as the ship tore into the ash-choked sky. Alien fighters streaked toward them, alarms flashing across the controls. Grant gritted his teeth, dragging the ship higher, feeling it buck and resist like a wild beast. "Come on," he snarled. "Come on!" The engines screamed. The ship shot upward, breaking through the smoke, breaking through the silence. And for the first time since the day Earth went dark, humanity was in the sky again. In orbit, alien fleets watched in shock as one of their own ships broke formation, streaking into the void. Reports flooded their channels. Humans had taken a dropship. Survivors were airborne. The council chambers would rage, commanders would curse, and strategists would whisper. But across the galaxy, one truth spread faster than their denial. Earth was not finished. Earth was rising. Inside the dropship, Grant gripped the controls, sweat and blood dripping from his face. Behind him, the surviving men clung to the walls, their eyes wide, their mouths open in awe. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just stared into the stars, his voice low and hard. "You thought silence meant death. You were wrong." The void of space opened before them, endless and black. Grant had seen it only once before. The stars unfiltered by atmosphere, raw and sharp against the dark. Back then, humanity had owned fleets, stations, pride. Now all of that was dust. Now he sat in the cockpit of a stolen enemy craft, sweat running into his eyes, hands clenched around alien controls he barely understood. The dropship rattled under his grip, engines screaming, alarms flashing symbols he couldn't read. Behind him, the survivors clung to the bulkheads, hollow-eyed but burning with the same madness that carried them through fire. And behind them, the hunters came. Dozens of alien fighters peeled from orbit, sleek and fast, their wings cutting across the void. Their comms lit the ether with signals, though none in the dropship could understand the words. But they didn't need to. The message was clear. You are prey. "Grant!" someone shouted from the rear, voice cracking. "They're on us!" Grant's jaw tightened. "Then we bleed them before they bleed us." The first volley struck. Blue-white plasma streaks slammed into the dropship's hull, the craft lurching violently. Men screamed as sparks showered the cabin, heat searing the air. One was thrown against the wall, his skull cracking open with a sound too final to ignore. Grant fought the controls, dragging the ship into a sharp roll. Alarms screamed louder, the hull groaning as the craft banked hard, slipping between the beams. His muscles burned as if the machine resisted him, but he forced it into submission. "Hold on!" he roared. The dropship dove, skimming the curve of Earth's broken atmosphere, fire licking its wings as alien fighters streaked overhead. Grant yanked another lever, and the ship's underside turrets groaned to life. "Who knows how to shoot?" Silence. Then a hand rose. A farmer, not a soldier, not a killer, just a man who had spent his life behind a plow. His face was pale, but his eyes burned. "Good enough," Grant barked. "Sit, aim, kill." The farmer strapped himself into the gunner's chair, hands trembling as he gripped the alien controls. He hesitated, until another plasma beam tore across their wing. His teeth clenched. He fired. The turret spat light, a jagged stream that cut one fighter in half. The survivors roared, the sound raw and animal. For the first time, the galaxy's predators had been struck from the sky by prey. But the enemy was relentless. More beams tore into the dropship, each hit rattling the hull. Metal groaned, panels burst, men bled from shrapnel and pressure bursts, clutching wounds with grim silence. Grant pushed the ship higher, into the black. The stars swallowed them, the curve of Earth falling away. Fighters swarmed, dozens of them, wings folding and splitting as they maneuvered with impossible grace. The farmer fired again, and another fighter spiraled into flame. But for everyone that fell, 3 more closed in. "They'll swarm us!" Kieran rasped from the rear, his chest still bandaged, his voice a graveled growl. "Let them," Grant snarled. His eyes locked on the void ahead, where the alien fleet loomed like gods. The galaxy wanted silence. Let's give them thunder instead. Another volley shook the dropship. Systems screamed, flames crawling along the walls. One survivor tried to smother them with his bare hands. flesh burning as he roared through clenched teeth. The others pulled him back, but he only laughed through his agony, spitting blood. Grant saw it in their faces. Not fear. Not anymore. They were past fear. "Brace!" he roared. He pulled the ship into a suicide dive straight through the enemy formation. Plasma ripped past, searing the hull, but the dropship plunged between two cruisers, their massive frames blotting out the stars. Alien fire lit the void, but most of it tore into their own ships as they tried to track the humans. The survivors howled in savage triumph as enemy fire ripped into enemy hulls. Grant dragged the ship sideways, alarms shrieking, his muscles shaking with the effort. The dropship spun, rolled, then righted itself with a violent lurch. Two more fighters exploded in the chaos, their debris scattering across the black. The farmer fired again, and again, his fear gone, replaced by raw rage. Each hit shook the void with fire. But the cost was brutal. One beam finally struck true, carving across the dropship's flank. Men were torn from their seats, sucked into the vacuum with screams cut short. The air grew thin, the cabin groaning under the pressure loss. Grant slammed a lever, emergency seals sliding shut. The survivors gasped for breath, clutching their chests, blood from burst vessels streaking their faces. Kieran coughed blood and laughed, the sound broken. "They'll remember this. By God, they'll remember." Grant said nothing. His eyes were locked ahead. Past the fleet, past the swarm, past the endless void. He wasn't thinking of survival. He was thinking of message. Humanity was not finished. Thus, alien council chambers lit up with reports. One of their dropships stolen, fleeing Earth. Pursued, engaged, casualties mounting. Some commanders raged, demanding extermination. Others dismissed it as nothing. But the old strategist stood in silence, watching the feed of alien fighters falling, of humans refusing to die quietly, his scarred mouth curled into something almost like respect. "Not silence," he murmured. "War." In the cockpit, Grant's hands bled against the controls, his body burning with exhaustion. But his eyes burned brighter than any star. The farmer roared as another fighter exploded. Men bled and laughed in the same breath. Kieran coughed his last, slumping against the wall, but his dead face still wore a smile. Grant drove the ship forward, deeper into the black, deeper into the fight. He didn't care if they lived. He didn't care if they burned. He only cared that the galaxy saw. "You wanted Earth silent," he growled into the void. "Instead, you woke us up." The dropship screamed into the stars, fire trailing in its wake, a coffin and a weapon all at once, and for the first time, the galaxy trembled. The dropship was bleeding to death. Hull plates peeled like skin, alarms shrieked in alien tongues, fire licked across the consoles. Every breath Grant took tasted of smoke and blood. Behind him, only 10 men still moved, their bodies broken, faces blackened with burns. But none begged. None whimpered. They clutched rifles, gritted teeth, and stared into the void with eyes that refused to close. The swarm closed in. Fighters circled like wolves, cutting across the black, beams searing closer with each pass. Alien cruisers loomed in the distance, their massive cannons aligning, ready to end this tiny act of defiance. Grant's hands were steady on the controls. His body was failing, ribs cracked, blood soaking his shirt, but his mind was sharp. He knew they wouldn't live another hour, maybe not another minute, and yet his lips curled into a snarl. "They wanted silence," he growled, half to himself, half to the men still breathing. "Let's give them something else." Kieran's body lay slumped at the rear, jaw bandaged, chest still. He had died hours ago, or maybe minutes. Time blurred in fire and chaos. The farmer still manned the turret, his face unrecognizable beneath blood and burns, but his hands kept firing. Each shot was weaker, but still defiant, still spitting rage into the void. Grant flicked through alien controls, his fingers moving not with knowledge, but instinct. Buttons glowed, levers shifted, systems screamed. He forced the dying ship into a climb, straight toward the enemy cruisers. The survivors realized his intent, not escape, not survival, vengeance. One man laughed, a wild, broken laugh that spread until they were all laughing, coughing blood and fire, howling like animals. Grant's snarl deepened. "Strap in, or burn. We're taking them with us." The alien fleet watched in silence as the stolen dropship turned, engines blazing, not away, but directly towards them. Panic spread across their channels. Fighters moved to intercept, plasma streaks slashing across the black, but the humans didn't break course. They plowed straight through, debris tearing off the hull, men screaming as the ship buckled. But still it climbed. Inside the council chambers, leaders shouted in disbelief, "Madness! They're suicidal!" The old strategist leaned forward, his scarred eyes locked on the feed, his voice low. "Not madness, humanity." The dropship's cockpit glowed with fire, consoles melting, alarms blaring. Grant's vision blurred, blood dripping into his eyes, but his hands never left the controls. Behind him, the survivors roared, not words, not prayers, just raw sound, the growl of men who refused to die quiet. The farmer fired one last time, cutting a fighter in half before a plasma beam tore through him. His body slumped, but his hands remained on the weapon, frozen in defiance. Grant's chest heaved. His brother's face flashed before him. The last words burned into his memory. "They don't want to kill us all. They want us to watch." Grant bared his teeth. "Watch this." The alien cruiser loomed ahead, its hull a wall of steel and light. Massive cannons flared, beams searing past, but too slow, too late. Grant drove the dropship forward, engines screaming, the ship tearing itself apart under the strain. He reached for the last control, an overload system he barely understood. The core hummed, energy spiking, the walls glowing with light. The survivors howled in unison, their voices raw, ragged, filling the void with the sound of Earth's final thunder. Grant slammed his hand down. The core detonated. The explosion was a sun in the black. The dropship became fire, ripping into the alien cruiser, tearing through its hull, splitting the beast apart. The shockwave rippled through the swarm, shredding fighters, scattering debris across the void. For a brief, blinding moment, silence was replaced with fury so bright the stars themselves seemed to shiver. When it faded, the cruiser was gone. The swarm was broken. And humanity's silence had been rewritten in fire. Across the galaxy, feeds carried the image, a single stolen ship, piloted by dying men, charging into annihilation and taking gods with them. Some races whispered in awe, others in fear, but all understood. Earth was not dead. Earth was not silent. Earth was coming. In the ashes of orbit, among drifting debris, nothing human remained. Grant Hale was gone, his body burned into starlight. But his voice echoed in the silence he left behind, carried in every whispered rumor, every trembling council chamber, every alien nightmare. They had silenced Earth, and in doing so, they had unleashed annihilation. The wreckage of the alien cruiser still burned in orbit, its carcass scattering across the void in molten fragments. Among the debris drifted shards of the stolen dropship, twisted and glowing, all that remained of Grant Hale and the men who had followed him. For a few moments, the galaxy had watched in stunned silence. And then, the whispers began. The galaxy trembles. On the neutral trade world of Juris, traders crowded the docking halls as news feeds replayed the explosion again and again. A single human dropship, a flame, plowing into the side of a cruiser that should have been untouchable. No survivors, no retreat. "They're insane," a merchant hissed, clutching his robes tighter. "They threw their lives away." An old smuggler at the bar shook his head. "Number they bought something with it. You feel it too, don't you? That chill? Like we've all just seen the beginning of something worse." A silence fell over the hall. Every species there knew the truth, though none wanted to say it. Humans were never dangerous because of their numbers, or their fleets, or their weapons. They were dangerous because of their refusal to die quietly. And now the galaxy had watched that refusal play out in fire. Two, the Alien Council. The chamber of the council blazed with arguments, voices overlapping in fury. Holoscreens still showed the explosion, frozen in mid-bloom. "This cannot continue," one shouted, scales flaring with rage. "They are broken, starved, yet they strike at cruisers like rabid animals. End them!" Another slammed a claw into the table. "Extermination will only make them martyrs. Already the colonies whisper of human defiance. Already our allies question our control." The presiding commander raised his hand for silence, though his own face was pale. "They are finished. One desperate act does not change inevitability." From the shadows, the old strategist rose. His scarred jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the flames flickering in the hollows. "You fools," he said. "You saw them die and thought it was victory, but death to humans is not silence. It is a message. Every ember you leave burning will grow into fire. You didn't kill a rebellion tonight. You gave it birth." But his warning was drowned in more shouting. 3. The survivors beyond Earth. Far from Earth, on a mining colony where humans labored under alien guards, the news traveled slowly. A smuggled data stick, passed in whispers, carrying grainy footage of the cruiser's death. In the barracks, men huddled around the flickering screen, their bodies bent from years of forced labor. They watched the explosion without sound, their faces unreadable. When it ended, one man spat blood onto the floor. "Grant Hale." He had heard the name once, years ago, back when Earth still spoke to the stars. Another man leaned forward, his hands trembling. "If they can burn a cruiser, so can we." And in that silence, broken by ragged breaths, the first seeds of rebellion took root in the outer colonies. 4. The rumor of Grant. On smuggler routes and pirate stations, Grant Hale became a name whispered like a curse and a prayer. Some said he had survived the explosion, drifting in the void, waiting to strike again. Others claimed he had been captured, that his execution would be broadcast across the stars. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was the image. A scarred man in a stolen ship, laughing at annihilation as he rammed himself into a god. The galaxy had killed a soldier. Humanity had gained a legend. Vi, Earth's ashes. Beneath the ruins of New Chicago, in the tunnels where Hale had trained his wolves, silence settled again. The last graves were unmarked, scattered bones buried in rubble. The city above remained broken, smoke rising in thin trails. But the silence was no longer submission. It was waiting. In the ruins, scattered survivors who had never joined Hale's fight found alien rifles in the dust, found crates half-buried in collapsed stations. They found themselves whispering his name as they loaded their weapons, their hunger turning into fire. "Grant Hale," they muttered. "We are not done." The enemy's fear. In orbit, alien fleets tightened their patrols. Dropships swept across the ruins, drones combed the cities. But for every crater they searched, for every tunnel they sealed, they found graffiti scrawled in human blood and ash. "We are coming." The commanders dismissed it as the desperation of vermin, but in private, they trembled. Vermin didn't take cruisers with them when they died. Vermin didn't make whole galaxies whisper. 7. The unbroken thread on a forgotten outpost beyond the rim, a human signal stirred. Weak, garbled, but real. It carried a name. It carried defiance. The message repeated in endless loops, scattered through static. This is Earth. We are not silent. We are not finished. No one knew who had sent it. No one knew if it was real or just another rumor born from the fire. But men across the colonies heard it. And for the first time since Earth went dark, they believed. 8th, the promise Grant Hale was dead. His body was ash among the stars, but his silence had been louder than words. His death had been a war cry. Across the galaxy, men sharpened knives, loaded rifles, and whispered his name. Not as a man, as a promise. The day Earth went silent, the galaxy thought annihilation was coming for mankind. The truth was darker. Annihilation was coming for the galaxy.